Thank you, Justin. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to the club today a national leader in the healthcare real estate industry, Mr. Ed Aldag. Mr. Aldag has served as the chairman, president, and CEO of Medical Properties Trust since its inception in 2003 when it was listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Today, Medical Properties Trust has total assets of more than $1 billion and owns acute care hospitals and rehabilitation centers in 21 states across the U.S., from California to Massachusetts. Mr. Aldag is a native of Eufaula, Alabama, and earned his bachelor's degree in commerce and business with a major in corporate finance from the University of Alabama. As some of you may know, fun fact about Mr. Aldag is that his son is the starting quarterback for the Mount Brook Spartans and led them to the semifinals in the state playoffs this year. Go Spartans. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Ed Aldag.
Thank you, Walker, Justin, and Kevin Garrison, who invited me here today. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. I missed out on Rotaract when I was coming along. I was 30 years old and joined the Rotary Club in Montgomery with the likes of Drew and Rob Will's grandfathers, and so I brought the average age there down to 70, so we didn't have the fun ski trips like you guys have had. What I thought I'd go through today is a very brief overview of who the company is, who Medical Properties Trust is, how we got started, maybe inspire some of you guys to do the same things that we did. And then if we have time, I'll go through some of the healthcare legislation, healthcare reform, and be glad to answer any questions. Also here with me today is Charles Lambert. Charles is our Director of Finance at MPT. Charles is here to make sure that I don't say anything that's not public information, so we don't have to file an 8K form. Also with me is my wife, Melinda, who put up with me through putting this company together. This first page, I'm sure all of you have seen before. This is what the lawyers say I have to say, that you can't rely on anything that I'm saying today. So I'll go through the formation of the company, life as a public company, talk about surviving the worst economic crisis that this country has ever seen since the Great Depression, and again, if we have time, the healthcare reform. Just very briefly, we started with zero. We've got properties now all across the country, 53 properties located from Massachusetts all the way to the West Coast. You'll see a map in a little while where that geographic diversification is. Our properties are primarily invested in acute care hospitals, but it is all licensed hospitals. We have a few medical office buildings that you'll see in just a few moments, and that's just some basic statistics about who the company is. Now, I started out in the healthcare field by accident in 1986. I went to work for a company that was a true real estate syndication company. And a company came down to Montgomery, Alabama, where I was working, that wanted to do a joint venture with Baptist Hospital. At that time, Baptist Hospital didn't joint venture with for-profit entities. This outfit was a hospital company that many of you may know. It was called Rehab Hospital Services Corporation, which ultimately became Continental Medical Systems. Continental Medical Systems was ultimately acquired by HealthSouth. So I actually spent my original part of my medical career working for HealthSouth's primary competitor. By that, I never got to work for HealthSouth. That paid off very well for me in the long run. I decided to sell my interest in that company in 2001, took some time off, and always wanted to get back into the healthcare business. So when I started putting this company together, there were no other companies out there that were truly focusing on acute care hospitals, that were financing the big box hospitals, the St. Vincent's, the Brookwoods, that we're all very familiar with. A lot of people did the medical office buildings. I wanted to put together a team of people that weren't primarily real estate people, but they were primarily medical people that had worked in acute care hospitals. So I went to New York, packed my bags, went to raise all this money. I got at least 100 no's. I came home and Melinda said, well, that was fun, wasn't it? But we didn't quit there. Shortly thereafter, HealthSouth was raided by the FBI. Alvarez and Marcel came in to work out their issues. They knew of me because HealthSouth ended up owning some of my properties that I had originally had at RHSC, and they called me in to see if we would acquire some of their properties because they were in dire need of cash. So we'd agreed to buy 6 of their properties. It was going to fund them about $100 million. We were 2 weeks away from closing when I got a phone call from the CEO of the investment banking firm that said, you know that $90 million loan that we promised we were going to give you? We're but we're not going to give it to you anymore. Now, that was 2 strikes, and I remember my CFO when he was sitting in the office next to me when we got that news. I think he was ready to pack up and go back to Houston. But we didn't quit, because if you believe in something and you know that it's absolutely a great idea, then you've got to go forward with it. And so we went back up to Virginia and met with that investment banking firm and said, look, we'll forget the $90 million loan, but this is still a great idea. You loved it when we told it to you a year and a half ago. You still love it. Let's go out and let's put together a company that's a blind pool. It's just 4 guys with an idea, 4 guys with a vision. We had no properties, but the market was absolutely right, and you know this is a good product. And so they did. They took us on a 3-week international road show. Now, I think I was 39 years old, pushing 40. I don't think I could still do that today. That was very, very grueling. It was literally 6 days. I had Sunday off. We were all over the world. I very seldom knew what country I was in. It was quite the grueling thing. Most of the people I was meeting with are people your age. That's who runs the billions and trillions of dollars in this country. It's people your age that are running the vast equity funds out there. They met me for 45 minutes, and they listened to our story, and they made decisions based off of material that we left and the material they provided beforehand, and meeting with me for 35 or 40 minutes to tell them the story of whether or not they were going to invest literally tens of millions of dollars with us. We were trying to raise $200 million. I remember we flew back from London and we had our very last meeting in Washington, D.C. There was a conference room with a glass wall. I had my back to the windows and I was facing the glass wall talking to the young fund manager. The investment banker came and got my CFO out of the room, and I could see them sitting on the couches outside of that glass window. And I saw my CFO put his hand down on his head, and I thought, oh my God, we failed, and American Express is going to be looking for me for the rest of my life. But the problem, the reason he put his hand down, is that we had orders for $900 million. Absolutely astounding. People from Spain, Germany, all over Europe, all over the country wanted to invest $900 million in this company that had no assets. We didn't even have a checking account. We took $250 million because I told them all what I could do and how quite fast I could do it. I didn't think I could do $900 million as fast as I thought I could do the 200. We took $250 million. We put all that to work. A year later, we went back to the market, and as Walker or Justin said, we got listed on the New York Stock Exchange in July of 2005. Now, that's a story in and of itself. My grandfather is an immigrant from Germany, came over here when he was 18 years old so that his family could have a better life than he and his family were having. Much of his family were lost during World War II. My grandfather was a locksmith for the New York Stock Exchange for 40 years. A locksmith. He wasn't one of the traders. He wasn't anybody important. And here we were, almost 60 years later, and I was ringing the bell of the New York Stock Exchange. And that's truly what this country is about if you truly believe in something. So why healthcare? Now, we all have heard a lot about healthcare in the last year and a half to 2 years. Well, demand for healthcare is clearly increasing. We all know that beginning this year, January the 1st, this was the year when the very first baby boomers are going to start retiring. They're the ones that are going to start taking all of the Medicare and whatnot. Now, I'm the last year of the baby boomers, not the first year, so I got a few more years. But the average 60-year-old uses a hospital 8 times more than the average 18-year-old. That's just common sense. We've all seen this graph. This graph shows the amount of money that we as a country are spending on health care. And you've seen this line. You've seen how it goes up. It's going to continue to go up. I don't care what form healthcare legislation takes, what we try to do to make savings, and we should. There are lots of ways to save on healthcare. But this line is going to continue to go up. Again, that's something you learn in 3rd grade. You can't keep adding more and more people to the system just for the fact that we're all getting older and expect that this line's going to go down. The only way this line goes down is if we don't have as much health care as we all have grown accustomed to. So health care is going to continue to be here. Hospitals, which is what we invest in. Many of them in this delivery system, all of you have probably been to the hospital at some time or another, either for yourselves or a family member, and you know it's a very antiquated delivery system. You look at just the hospitals here in town, and we have some of the best hospitals in the country here in town. They're parts of them that were built in the 1800s, parts that were built in the early 1900s, and they keep added on to, and it's an incredible maze. It's hard to find your way around in the hospital. It's a very inefficient system. We badly need to replace our delivery system in this country. Now, I talked about this a few minutes ago. If you're going to invest in hospitals, you better have a management team that understands hospitals, not just the real estate side of it, but very importantly, what goes on when you're operating a hospital. So when we put together our management team, these are the people that we hired. Now, why would somebody come to Medical Properties Trust? And this is just a very quick example that I'll use here. When we're going to a hospital, I'm just going to randomly use St. Vincent's here. Let's say that St. Vincent's wants to acquire another hospital. They've got that asset there in that big box building of theirs that they can do one of three things with. Nothing, or they can mortgage it, go out and get a loan from a bank, but a bank's not going to provide them 100% value on that building. They're lucky if they're going to get the number that we used here in the model, which is 60%, or they can come to somebody like us where we'll give them 100% of the value in that building. Now, our rates are higher than what a mortgage is going to be, but that's because the mortgage is only doing it on 60%. We're doing it on 100%. Our typical rates today are somewhere in the 10% range. If you can get the loan today, which you generally can't get long-term mortgage-type financing on a hospital, it'd be somewhere in the 8% range. But the problem is that you can't overlook is the opportunity cost that they have on that equity portion, that 40% that they've either got to leave in or come up with to put back in the hospital. That's real money. That's real money that they could use to buy medical practices, could buy more equipment, other things that are going to make them good profit margins in the 20 to 30+%. You've got to take that in consideration when you're comparing the cost. When you take all that in consideration, the cost of doing typical financing is roughly 12% versus our roughly 10%. Every time we've been able to sit down with a CFO of a hospital and walk through this model, we've been able to win the financing of it. Now, what do we look for in a hospital? What do we look for when we go into a market? Well, the first thing seems real obvious. Is there a need for that hospital in that market? Is there a need for that particular type of facility? Second thing is physician support. There's nobody in this room, unless there's a doctor, that can admit themselves to the hospital. You've got to have physician orders to be admitted into a hospital. So you've got to have that physician support, and you can get it in a lot of different ways, but you've got to absolutely be sure that the physicians want to use that hospital. The third thing is who's going to run the hospital, who's the management team, or what's the management company. That's the only thing you can be wrong about and still be successful. If you're wrong about the need, you're dead. If you're wrong about the physicians, you can fix it if you've got enough money, but it takes years to fix it, so you better not be wrong about that. The management team, you can replace it while it's painful. It's something that can be done. Now, when you look at us and all of the other healthcare REITs out there, as Justin was talking about, that he works at Colonial Properties, and they primarily do typical commercial real estate that we're all used to, apartment buildings, retail, and office buildings, although they're focusing more primarily on apartments these days. In the healthcare REIT business, when people talk about healthcare REITs, they're primarily talking about medical office buildings or nursing homes or assisted living facilities. That's not what we do. Ours is all hospitals, and it's primarily acute care hospitals. When you look at our portfolio, we probably have more physical rehabilitation hospitals than LTACs, but from a dollar investment, because it costs a lot more on an acute care hospital, this is how it breaks out. Our portfolio, we're headquartered here in Alabama, but most of our properties are located in California, Texas, and everywhere in between. There's not a state in this country that we wouldn't go to. There's only been a couple of places that we've turned down because of location. That's primarily been in the Rust Belt areas like Ohio and Detroit, where the focus primarily on the automobile industry, and the markets there just continue to die. And then a couple of other opportunities that we've had in Manhattan. It's hard to find a real community in Manhattan. This is our operator diversification. We've got a great group of operators. We've got some operators that you'll know, and some of them that you probably never have heard of. Prime Healthcare Services is our largest operator. They're the 8th largest hospital operator in the country, and probably the